Fallout 5 can't be just good, and it definitely can't be decent. Bethesda needs Fallout 5 to be great, because we're heading into a changed landscape of popular media, and Fallout is on the cusp of breaking the mold for the gaming industry as a whole. Let me explain.
Hello there. I'm here to show you a wonderful place. A veritable Camelot of the nuclear age.
It's April 2024. You're scrolling through social media, and everywhere you look, people are talking about Fallout. Not because a new game just dropped, not because of some anniversary celebration, but because of a TV show. A TV show so good that it sent Fallout, a game released nearly a decade earlier, rocketing back to the top of Steam's most played charts. Fallout 76, a game that launched to one of the most disastrous receptions in gaming history, suddenly found itself with packed servers and lines of players waiting to experience the wasteland. This wasn't just a bump in player counts. This was a cultural moment. The Fallout TV series on Prime Video did something that seemed almost impossible in 2024. It united casual viewers and hardcore fans in genuine excitement about a video game franchise. It reminded the world why we fell in love with this post-apocalyptic universe in the first place. The dark humor, the retro-futuristic aesthetic, the moral complexity, and those unforgettable stories of humanity trying to rebuild from the ashes. But here's where our story takes a turn, because whilst millions of people were discovering or rediscovering their love for Fallout, Bethesda Game Studios found itself in a peculiar position. They had the attention of the world, a fan base energized like never before, and absolutely no new mainline Fallout game to give them. Not for years, maybe not until the 2030s. And that's what brings us here today, because when Fallout 5 finally does arrive, after what will likely be one of the longest waits between mainline entries in franchise history, it can't just be good. It needs to be great, not good enough to get a 7 out of 10, not solid enough to satisfy the faithful while disappointing everyone else. It needs to be genuinely, undeniably, blow your mind great. Let me tell you why. To understand why the stakes are so high for Fallout 5, we need to understand the storm that's been brewing. And like any good storm, this one has been building from multiple directions at once. Let's start with the TV show, because that's where this new chapter really begins. When Amazon announced they were making a Fallout series, the reaction from fans was cautious at best. We'd all been burned before. We'd watched beloved game franchises get adapted into forgettable films and mediocre shows. We'd learned to keep our expectations in check. But Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, the creative minds behind Westworld, understood something crucial. Fallout isn't just about the nuclear apocalypse or the retro-futuristic aesthetic. It's about people. It's about the stories we tell ourselves to survive. It's about how civilization tries to rebuild itself, often repeating the same mistakes that led to its destruction in the first place. The show didn't just capture the look and feel of Fallout, though it did that brilliantly, with practical effects and production design that made you believe you were actually in the wasteland. It captured the spirit, that perfect blend of dark humor and genuine heart, the moral ambiguity, the revelation that the great corporations and vaults were often more monstrous than any mutant wandering the surface. When that first season dropped, something remarkable happened. People who had never picked up a controller in their lives were suddenly asking their gamer friends, "So which Fallout should I play?" Meanwhile, longtime fans were diving back into their favorite entries, seeing them with fresh eyes, appreciating details they'd overlooked before. The numbers don't lie. Fallout 4 saw a player spike of over 5 million concurrent players across all platforms in the weeks following the show's release. That's not just impressive, it's unprecedented for a 9-year-old game. New Vegas, beloved by fans but technically outdated, suddenly found itself with more active players than some brand new releases. Even Fallout 76, the game that nearly broke the community's faith in Bethesda, experienced a renaissance as players gave it another chance and discovered that years of updates had transformed it into something genuinely worth playing. But here's the thing about lightning in a bottle. You can't just expect to catch it twice. The show created a moment, a wave of enthusiasm that Bethesda couldn't capitalize on because they were caught between projects. And by the time Fallout 5 releases, that wave will be long past. The question becomes, can Bethesda create a game game so good that it starts its own wave? Can they deliver an experience that not only satisfies the millions of new fans the show brought in, but also honors the decades-long loyalty of the players who've been here since the beginning? Now let's talk about why Fallout 5 is so far away, because this is where the story gets complicated, and it's a complication that a lot of fans don't fully appreciate. Bethesda Game Studios isn't like other developers. They don't have separate teams working on different franchises simultaneously. They're a single studio with a single vision, and they work on one massive game at a time. Right now, that game is The Elder Scrolls 6. Before that, it was Starfield, which released in 2023 after years of development. Before Starfield, it was Fallout 4. You see the pattern. This approach has its advantages. It means every game gets the full force of Bethesda's creative energy and resources. It means consistency in vision and quality control. But it also means long gaps between entries in beloved franchises. Really long gaps. Let's do the math, because it's sobering. Starfield released in September 2023. The Elder Scrolls 6 was announced way back in 2018, and we still don't have a release date. Most industry analysts expect it won't arrive until 2026 or 2027 at the earliest. If we're generous and say it launches in late 2026, and we assume Bethesda immediately pivots to Fallout 5, we're looking at a development cycle of at least 4 to 5 years for a game of Fallout scope. That puts Fallout 5's release somewhere around 2030 or 2031. Think about that. Fallout 4 came out in 2015. If Fallout 5 releases in 2030, that's a 15-year gap between mainline entries. 15 years. An entire generation of gamers will have grown up in a world where they never experienced a new Fallout game at launch. The youngest players who experienced Fallout 4's release as adults will be approaching middle age when Fallout 6 arrives. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what about Fallout 76? Doesn't that count? And technically, yes, it's a Fallout game. But it wasn't a mainline entry. It wasn't a single-player, story-driven RPG in the tradition of New Vegas and 4. It was an experiment, a multiplayer survival game that launched in such a rough state that it actually damaged the franchise's reputation rather than enhancing it. The industry has changed dramatically since 2015. When Fallout 4 launched, Battle Royale games weren't a thing. Game streaming was in its infancy. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X didn't exist. Hell, the Nintendo Switch didn't exist. We've seen entire genres rise and fall. We've seen gaming go from a niche hobby to a dominant entertainment medium that rivals Hollywood in revenue and cultural impact. And here's what makes this wait particularly challenging. Technology has advanced. Player expectations have evolved. The bar for what constitutes a great open-world RPG has been raised by games like The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring. The formula that worked for Fallout 4 won't be enough in 2030. The engine, the design philosophy, and the storytelling approach, everything needs to evolve. And speaking of evolution, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the creation engine. For those who don't know, the creation engine is Bethesda's proprietary game engine, the technical foundation on which their games are built. It's an evolution of the Gamebryo engine that powered Fallout 3 and Skyrim, which itself was an evolution of even older technology. This engine is, to put it bluntly, ancient by industry standards. Now, before the comments light up, let me be clear. The creation engine isn't inherently bad. It's what allows Bethesda to create their signature open worlds where every object can be picked up, where NPC schedules create emergent gameplay, where you can stack 200 cheese wheels in your house if that's how you choose to play. It's what enables modders to create incredible content that extends these games' lifespans for years, even decades. But it's also the source of some of Bethesda's most persistent problems. The janky physics, the facial animations that feel dated the moment the game launches, the bugs. Oh, the bugs. The fact that after all these years, players still expect to quick save before walking through any doorway because there's a non-zero chance the game will crash or they'll clip through the floor. Starfield was supposed to be the answer to these criticisms. It ran on Creation Engine 2, a supposedly overhauled version that would address the technical limitations while maintaining the mod friendliness and design flexibility that makes Bethesda games special. And to be fair, it did improve some things, but it also proved that some problems are baked into the very DNA of this engine, and no amount of iteration can fully overcome them. The animation system in Starfield still felt stiff compared to modern standards. The loading screens, while faster on SSDs, still broke immersion in ways that contemporary open-world games had learned to avoid. The procedural generation, while ambitious, highlighted the engine's limitations in creating truly varied and interesting spaces without heavy designer intervention. Now imagine Fallout 5 running on this same engine, or even an evolved version of it, releasing in 2030. Imagine it going up against whatever Rockstar, CD Projekt Red, From Software, and other industry leaders will have released by then. Imagine it being compared to games built on Unreal Engine 5 or whatever comes next, with photorealistic graphics, seamless transitions, and AI-driven NPC behaviors that make every interaction feel unique and alive. This is the technical challenge Bethesda faces. They need to either push the creation engine further than it's ever gone before, accepting the limitations that come with that, or they need to make the incredibly difficult decision to start over with new technology. Either path is fraught with risk. Stick with creation engine, and you risk releasing a game that feels technically dated on arrival, no matter how good the story and world design are. Start over with a new engine, and you risk losing the special sauce that makes Bethesda games feel like Bethesda games: the mod support, the environmental storytelling, the systems-driven gameplay that creates those emergent moments we all remember. But let's step back from the technical side and look at the competitive landscape, because that's evolved dramatically too. When Fallout 4 released in 2015, the open-world RPG space looked very different. The Witcher 3 had just launched that same year, setting a new standard for narrative depth and world building, but it was still a relatively new watermark. Most open-world games were still following the Ubisoft formula: towers to climb, icons to clear off a map, repetitive side content. Bethesda's approach, creating a dense world full of environmental stories and allowing players to ignore the main quest entirely if they wanted, felt fresh and engaging. Today, the landscape is unrecognizable. Red Dead Redemption 2 showed us what was possible when a studio combined an incredibly detailed open world with narrative depth and animation quality that made every character interaction feel real. The Witcher 3's expansions, particularly Blood and Wine, proved that post-launch content could be better than most games' base campaigns. Elden Ring demonstrated that open world design could be both vast and meticulously crafted, with every discovery feeling intentional and rewarding. Even outside the traditional RPG space, games like Ghost of Tsushima and God of War have raised the bar for what players expect from world design, combat depth, and visual presentation. The industry has learned that players don't just want bigger worlds, they want better worlds. More meaningful, more reactive, more alive. And then there's the elephant in the room: Obsidian Entertainment. The studio that created Fallout New Vegas is now owned by Microsoft, the same parent company that owns Bethesda. They've been working on the Outer Worlds franchise, which is essentially their own take on what a Fallout-style game could be without the Fallout license. While the Outer Worlds didn't quite reach the heights of New Vegas, it showed that Obsidian still knows how to craft the kind of choice-driven, dialogue-heavy RPG that many fans wish Bethesda would make. There's been endless speculation about whether Microsoft might give Obsidian another shot at Fallout, maybe a spin-off set on the West Coast while Bethesda works on Fallout 5. But regardless of whether that happens, the fact that fans are clamoring for it tells you something important. There's a portion of the fan base that doesn't fully trust Bethesda to deliver the kind of Fallout experience they want. This is the reality Fallout 6 will be released into. It's not enough to be a good game. It's not even enough to be a great Bethesda game. It needs to stand alongside the best of the best and hold its own. It needs to justify that 15-year wait. Now let's talk about something that makes this situation even more complicated: the Fallout fan base itself, which has become increasingly fractured over the years. There are the original Fallout fans, the ones who played the isometric classics from Interplay and Black Isle Studios. They remember when Fallout was about turn-based tactical combat, about meaningful choices that could lock you out of entire quest lines, about a world that didn't hold your hand or guarantee a happy ending. Many of them never fully embraced Bethesda's first-person approach, seeing it as a simplification of what made Fallout special. Then there are the Fallout 3 fans, who discovered the series through Bethesda's first attempt at the franchise. For them, wandering the capital wasteland, discovering the dark secrets of the vaults, and making the choice between the Brotherhood and the Enclave defined what Fallout meant. Appreciate the environmental storytelling, the exploration, the feeling of being a lone wanderer in a dangerous world. The New Vegas faithful are perhaps the most vocal group. They point to Obsidian's entry as proof that you can have Bethesda's first-person gameplay with the kind of narrative depth, faction complexity, and moral ambiguity that define the original games. They want dialogue skill checks, reputation systems, multiple endings that actually reflect your choices, and a world that reacts to your actions in meaningful ways. Fallout 4 fans enjoy the improved combat, the settlement building, the more personal story of finding your son. They might not care as much about deep dialogue trees or skill checks, but they love customizing their power armor and turning Sanctuary Hills into a thriving community. And then there are the Fallout 76 players who found community in the multiplayer wasteland despite its rocky launch. They want cooperation, shared experiences, and the ability to explore these worlds with friends. Oh, and now we have a new group, the TV show fans who might not have played any of the games yet, or who played Fallout 4 for the first time because of the show. They're coming in with fresh eyes and expectations shaped by prestige television rather than gaming conventions. Here's the challenge. All of these groups want something different. Some of these wants are compatible. Many are not. You can't make a game that simultaneously offers New Vegas-style complexity and Fallout 4-style accessibility. You can't create a deeply personal, curated narrative while also allowing the kind of emergent gameplay that comes from open-ended systems. You can't please everyone, and every choice they make will disappoint someone. The question is whether they can make choices that feel bold and confident, that create something with a clear vision, even if that vision doesn't align with what every fan wants. Because here's the truth. The worst thing Fallout 5 could be is being a game designed by committee, trying to please everyone and ultimately satisfying no one. That's how you get a game that's merely good. That's how you get a game that checks all the boxes but has no soul. So what would great actually look like for Fallout 6? What would it take to not just meet expectations but exceed them? First, it needs to nail the fundamentals that make Fallout special. The dark humor, the moral ambiguity, the environmental storytelling that lets you piece together pre-war tragedies just by exploring a building. The feeling that civilization is trying to rebuild itself while making many of the same mistakes. These are non-negotiable. These are what make a game feel like Fallout rather than just another post-apocalyptic shooter. But beyond that, it needs to evolve. It needs to learn from what worked in previous games, all of them, not just Bethesda's entries, and combine those lessons into something that feels fresh. Imagine a Fallout 5 that brings back the faction depth found in New Vegas, but integrates it more seamlessly into the world, where your actions don't just change a number on a hidden stats screen, but visibly alter how NPCs react to you, what quests become available, what areas are safe or hostile, where joining the Brotherhood of Steel doesn't just lock you into a linear quest chain, but opens up an entire web of possibilities and consequences. Imagine companion characters with the depth of those in Fallout 4, but with the ability to actually disagree with you in meaningful ways, where they might leave if you push them too far, or where building relationships with them unlocks not just unique perks, but fundamentally changes how you can approach problems. Imagine a world that reacts to your presence over time, where if you clear out a raider camp, settlers might actually move in, where if you help a faction grow strong in one region, they naturally expand into neighboring areas, where the wasteland feels alive and dynamic rather than static. Imagine environmental design that learns from Elden Ring's approach to exploration, less about following map markers and more about seeing something interesting in the distance and trusting that when you get there, you'll find something worth discovering, where the joy of exploration comes not from checking items off a list, but from genuine curiosity and the promise of unique, handcrafted encounters. Imagine a main story that doesn't force you into a predefined role, but instead lets you define who your character is through your actions and dialogue choices. Not just press X to be sarcastic, but actual branching conversations that require you to think about what your character would say and do. Imagine technical polish that matches the ambition, animations that don't look dated, performance that's stable, bugs that don't require community patches to fix. I know this sounds like a fantasy for a Bethesda game, but if we're talking about what great looks like, it has to include basic technical competence, and maybe most importantly, importantly, imagine a game that takes the lessons from the TV show and understands that the best Fallout stories are about people, not just the player character, but the communities they encounter, the ways people survive, adapt, and try to build something new from the ashes. The show succeeded because it made us care about characters like Lucy, Maximus, and Cooper Howard. Fallout 6 needs to create NPCs that resonate on that same emotional level. Now we need to address something that's been hovering over this entire discussion: Microsoft's acquisition of Bethesda. When Microsoft bought ZeniMax Media in 2021 for $7.5 billion, it fundamentally changed the equation for Bethesda game studios. They're no longer an independent developer trying to maximize sales across all platforms. They're now a first-party Microsoft studio, which comes with both benefits and pressures. On the positive side, Microsoft has deep pockets and a stated commitment to giving their studios time and resources to make great games. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, has repeatedly emphasized that they're not going to rush their developers, that they'd rather delay a game than release something that isn't ready. In theory, this should mean Bethesda has the freedom to take the time Fallout 6 needs without the financial pressure to ship early. But there's another side to this equation. Microsoft bought Bethesda to sell Game Pass subscriptions and Xbox consoles. They need exclusive games that justify their platform. They need system sellers. And after Starfield's somewhat mixed reception, a game that was supposed to be Microsoft's Skyrim in space, but ended up being more divisive than anyone expected, there's pressure for their next big exclusive to be an unqualified success. Fallout 6 will likely be exclusive to Xbox and PC, at least at launch. That means it's not just representing Bethesda's reputation, it's representing Microsoft's entire gaming strategy. It needs to be good enough that people who own PlayStations or Switches consider buying an Xbox or building a PC just to play it. That's a high bar. There's also the question of how Microsoft's corporate structure affects development. Bethesda is now part of a much larger machine, with all the bureaucracy and corporate oversight that entails. Will they still have the creative freedom to make bold choices? Or will decisions get filtered through layers of executives worried about quarterly earnings and subscriber metrics? The optimistic view is that Microsoft learned from the Starfield experience that they saw what happens when you let hype get ahead of the actual game, and they'll approach Fallout 6 with more measured expectations and better support. The pessimistic view is that they'll see Fallout as too important to fail and will meddle, focus test, and committee design it into something safe and forgettable. We won't know which scenario plays out until the game is in our hands. But the Microsoft factor adds another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Let's zoom out and look at what's really at stake here, because it's more than just one game. Bethesda Game Studios' reputation is on the line. Fallout 4, for all its strengths, was criticized for dumbing down the RPG elements. Fallout 76 was a disaster that took years to recover from. Starfield was supposed to be their grand return to form, and while it has its defenders, it didn't achieve the universal acclaim of Skyrim or Fallout 3. If Fallout 5 disappoints, it will fuel the narrative that Bethesda has lost their touch, that they can't compete with modern standards, and that the golden age of Bethesda Game Studios is behind us. That's the kind of reputation damage that's hard to recover from. But it's not just Bethesda's reputation. The entire single-player RPG genre is watching. In an industry increasingly dominated by live service games, battle passes, and multiplayer experiences, big-budget single-player RPGs are becoming rarer. Everyone that succeeds is a testament to the viability of the genre. Everyone that fails makes publishers more nervous about greenlighting the next one. Fallout as a franchise is at a crossroads. The TV show proved there's massive mainstream appeal for this world and these stories. But if the game that follows disappoints, it could damage that momentum. Casual viewers who decided to give Fallout 6 a try based on their love of the show could walk away thinking, maybe video games just aren't for me, rather than recognizing that this particular game missed the mark. And then there's the cultural moment. We're living in a time when video games are finally being recognized as a legitimate art form, when game adaptations are actually good, when the lines between games and other entertainment are blurring. Fallout has a chance to be at the forefront of that cultural shift, but only if Fallout 6 is good enough to justify the attention. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about whether a game gets an 8 or a 9 on review aggregate sites. It's about whether Bethesda can prove they still belong in the conversation about the industry's best developers. It's about whether Fallout remains relevant as we move into the 2030s. It's about whether the fans who've waited 15 years feel like that wait was worth it. So, here we are, somewhere in Bethesda Game Studios' offices, probably in the form of design documents and early prototypes. Fallout 6 exists. The team knows the weight of expectations on their shoulders. They've seen the player count spike when the show released. They've read the forums, watched the YouTube videos, and seen the fan art and theories and wish lists. They know that good won't be enough. Good is what gets you through the door. Good is what satisfies people who are going to buy the game regardless. Good is what gets you a 7 out of 10 and fades from memory within a year. Great is what creates moments people remember for decades. Great is what generates passionate communities that keep games alive long after release. Great is what makes people say, you have to play this game, rather than, it's pretty good if you're into that sort of thing. The Fallout TV show was great. It didn't just adapt a video game, it understood what made that game special and translated it into a different medium while adding its own voice. It took risks. It committed to its tone. It trusted the audience to appreciate the moral complexity and dark humor. Fallout 5 needs to do the same thing. It needs to understand what makes Fallout special, not just the aesthetic, not just the setting, but the feeling of wandering a dangerous world and finding glimmers of hope and humanity in unexpected places. It needs to evolve beyond what came before while honoring the legacy. It needs to be technically competent enough that the bugs become quirky anecdotes rather than deal-breaking frustrations. Most importantly, it needs to be made by people who love this world and these stories, who aren't just checking boxes on a design document, but are genuinely excited to show us what comes next. Will it achieve all this? I don't know. Nobody does. The game is years away, and so much can happen in development. But I do know this: we're not asking for the impossible. We're asking for the same thing Bethesda has delivered before, multiple times across multiple franchises. We're asking for them to be at their best, because this moment demands nothing less. The wasteland is waiting. The vaults are sealed. After the TV show has introduced millions of people to this world, after all the hype and speculation and theories, it needs to be worth it. It needs to be great. Because good just won't be enough anymore. War never changes, but games do. They have to.